Hey guys, so today we're going to go through a recipe I've been wanting to try for a while, even before starting keto. If you don't know, pho is a very popular Vietnamese noodle dish. It's similar in concept to Japanese ramen, which I only say because the latter is probably more commonly known in the States. Now, there are a lot of important differences between the dishes, but the two similarities are that both are named after the noodles involved, whereas the broth is really the heart of the bowl. Since I began a keto lifestyle earlier this year, I've really been missing pho, maybe more than any other one specific food, but it's really not terribly hard to convert it to a low-carb recipe. Now, we aren't aiming so much for authenticity in this video as for flavor and experience. This recipe is supposed to help someone cure that pho craving without cheating on their keto diet, and we've got a couple of other little shortcuts baked into it too. Now, our first hack is the big boy in front, the rotisserie chicken. We'll be using the meat to dress the pho, but we'll actually be using the carcass in our broth as well, which will basically be a fortification of store-bought broth, or if you've got homemade standard chicken stock, by all means. Now, the MVP that's turning this dish keto are the shirataki noodles. I really don't love this product in Italian pasta dishes, but they work pretty well in East Asian applications. And the other ingredients I'll discuss as we use them in the recipe, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is actually char our onion and ginger. It's a technique that it's standard for pho, not really anything. I've never tried it before until this recipe, and I haven't really seen it in too many other dishes, but in pho, it's the way to go. Now, you could do this in an oven with your broiler, but I've got gas, so I just decided to do it on the stove. I don't recommend using your best forks for this. The onion caused some sort of it got a charring effect on the tines of my fork here, but I also recommend having a fire extinguisher nearby since my onion did catch flame a little bit. And you just want to get it really nice and toasted. Make sure it's pretty well peeled first, and once the onion's good, we're going to move on to a piece of ginger here. We want a good bit. Ginger's not going to take quite as long. I can tell you that the ginger smelled incredible once we took it to the flame. And you just want to get it nice and charred all over. Make sure that you can get all the angles. Be careful when you're moving it. You can see there on the fork the marks that were left. So once we've charred those off, we're going to disassemble our chicken. Nothing too crazy here. Hopefully, if you've got a good rotisserie chicken, it's just going to fall off the bone anyway. I'm also going to remove the skin and save that. We're going to crisp that up, something special to serve along with the meat in our final product. But you want to take all the meat off the bone, reserve the skin, and put the entire remaining carcass in a separate bowl. I also drained off the resting juices that were from the chicken already. And then we're going to be able to move on to our spices. Now we're going to use some cloves, about three whole cloves. There, we're going to try to get some of that nice bright citrusy flavor from coriander. Just a little teaspoon there of coriander. Now we want some heat in our broth. You can dress it with other things like sambal or sriracha, but the chili flakes are going to give us that. We're not going to use any other pepper in the broth, but I do want some black peppercorns in the initial broth. And then finally some fennel seed. Star anise is a very popular ingredient here in pho, but I didn't have any, so I'm getting that anise flavor from my fennel. Now we want to disassemble our ginger and our onion just to make it infuse into the broth easier, so just cut that up into big chunks. And then we need to toast our spices first. Now my pot was pretty hot, so you'll see I don't toast these terribly long because I didn't want them to burn. Yeah, we're just going to get the spices going there for a good minute or two until you can really smell them. And then at that point, we're going to take the carcass, not the resting juices, just the bones and whatnot, and place it in the pot with our spices in order to just develop a little bit of a fond and get a bit of color on it, not too much. This step sort of Optional, but I think it adds a bit to the broth. And we're also going to add in our onion and our ginger, along with just a couple of carrots. I can't help but add carrot to our broth, as well as 3 cloves of garlic that we've just crushed. Now, once this is good and we've developed a little bit of color there, we're just going to add 2 quarts of a store-bought chicken broth. Like I said earlier, you can use homemade if you've got it, but kind of the point here is that this is just a Tuesday night kind of thing where we're trying to get pho pretty quickly. I also just topped it off with a bit of water since we will have some evaporation. I added a touch of salt at this point, but maybe don't do too much because I'm going to use some Maggi sauce, which is pretty salty, to add some depth and umami. And then, of course, a pretty mandatory ingredient here is our fish sauce. Add maybe just a little bit more than you would think. Very important for the overall flavor. Bring that to a boil, and then we're going to turn the heat down to a medium low and just let this baby simmer for a good hour. Now we're going to move on to the noodles. Dealing with these can be a little bit complicated, and it's a bit of a turnoff for some people. I recommend not just sticking your knife right there on the side of the sink pointing towards you, but the first thing you're going to notice is that these have a slightly off smell when you open them. To me, it smells sort of like fresh shrimp, and this can be mostly remedied by rinsing well, which is what I'm doing here. And then some people like to boil the noodles in salted water, but to me it's a pretty easy approach to simply dry toast them in a skillet. So we're going to add the noodles over some pretty high heat here, and we're going to let all of the water evaporate, stirring to accelerate that process. And you're just going to dry toast them here until the water is gone. They seem pretty dry, and you're actually going to be able to hear the noodles make a strange sound. That's sort of how you know that they're done. It's a squeaking sound, which I'll give you a sample of here in a moment. And once you hear this squeaking, then you know that the noodles are ready. Now that our noodles are done, we're not done with our skillet, we're going to use that chicken skin and crisp that up real nice until it glistens and you can hear the beautiful frying of the skin so that you know it's done. Now I am going to dress the final bowl with cilantro, but I had some pretty long stems, so for the last 10 minutes or so of the cooking, I just removed the long stems from my cilantro and threw that in the broth. Now we have the task of filtering out all of the gunk that we don't want. A few different ways you could do this. I probably didn't do it the most efficient way, but I started off just by trying to scoop out some of the bigger bits so that when I finally lifted up the whole stock pot and drained it, that it wouldn't overwhelm the strainer. That's basically all you want to do. We just want to get this as clear of all of these particulates as possible. Now, normally a pho made from scratch, the broth is going to be quite clear, and we don't have that luxury in this situation. But yeah, just get as much out as you can, and you're going to have a product you should be pretty happy with. So now that our broth is ready, the noodles are ready, we are going to tear out pieces of our chicken, place it over the noodles. You can do this as carefully as you want. And then I'm going to slice a lime here. Those are the greens that I use. Normally you use bean sprouts, but I couldn't actually find them for this recipe. And the cilantro and basil right there. So we add our broth over the top. Get it nice and saturated with the broth, which really brings everything else back to temperature. You want the broth really boiling when you pour it over. So now we're going to add the chicken skin that we had, along with our herbs, the cilantro and Thai basil. Which takes a bit to peel it all off, but it's worth it. And a squeeze of lime. I'll also be dressing with just a little bit of soy and just a quick squirt of sriracha, and then the sprouts. Okay, well, let's give it a try, guys. See how our hard work paid off. Go in straight for some of the noodles. As usual, shirataki noodles have no flavor, but yeah. Rotisserie chicken, man, it is something special. Ooh. And the skin soaks just a little bit. Really interesting texture comes out. It tastes like pho. And that's what I wanted. Ooh, the basil. Right. Even the sprouts. I kind of like this texture more than the standard bean sprout. Some lime. I'm actually just going to get a sip of the broth. I need to get myself one of those nice spoons. Ooh. The sriracha's come in and just that little drizzle I put on. Real nice. Yeah, well, worked out. Pretty dang low carb too. 2 servings of the shirataki noodles, but that's 2 net carbs. Other than that, really not a whole lot going on. A little in the soy. Obviously, I put some veg like onions and carrot into my broth, but you know, those are trace carbs. They should not be discounted, but otherwise, compared to your standard pho. Actually, at the store today, when I was trying to find bean sprouts and could not, they had just a packaged pho that you could make on your own, which was just 1 serving was 65 grams of carbohydrate with no fiber, which I thought was pretty interesting. But yeah, so we're definitely hitting way below that. No problem making this fit your macros. The rotisserie chicken was a really helpful way to save some time, and it's real good. No complaints there. The white meat is really nice, and everything. But the you could make this beef pho is actually my favorite, and you got some oxtail or something and made a beef pho. You would really, you'd be up in that fat ratio and have something really special. But for a Tuesday night, start to finish, ignoring the shortcuts, yeah, no complaints here. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Let's keep it keto.